Everyone. Let's call this meeting of this special board meeting of the Milford Exempted Village School District to order. Mr. Espy, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Combs? Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I need a motion to approve the agenda that you have in front of you.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. Call roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting held on November 9th, 2023.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. Call roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. This brings us to our first public participation. This is a 30-minute segment. Each individual gets 3 minutes. So, do we have anyone?
I have none.
Okay. Moving right ahead. Board of Education business, we're going to have a discussion tonight. The main purpose for this meeting was the discussion and consideration of tax levy resolutions for March 2024 ballot. Mr. Spicer, you want to start with comments?
Yes, Mr. Espy has a presentation for us this evening to go over some of the proposed tax levy resolutions and some other information for the board to consider. Mr. Espy.
Thank you, Mr. Spicer, Mr. Miranda, and members of the board. Wanted to go over and respond to some data that was shared last meeting, and then get into some specifics on 3 resolutions that I'm bringing to the board tonight for consideration, and also details surrounding each of those resolutions. There was a mention, I believe Mr. Combs brought up Upper Arlington, and I wanted to take a moment to share some data points about Upper Arlington and how they're different from Milford Exempted Village Schools. The first item is at the top. These are per pupil expenditures. So as you can see, Upper Arlington up in this top section is over $17,000 of expenditures per pupil. And this is on, by the way, I should say, this is from the latest CUP report. So this is 2022 data. The 2023 data should be out sometime in January or February. So this is, a difference of 17 plus thousand and 12,221.41 that Milford is spending per pupil. In the bottom section, this right here is average administrator salaries. So as we can see right here, Upper Arlington is spending somewhere between $118,000 to $120,000 per administrator, whereas Milford is slightly above $100,000. This middle section shows how many students are served by each administrator. The bottom section is showing that Milford is serving over 200 students per 1 full-time equivalent administrator, versus in the green here, Upper Arlington is serving around 160. Over on the left, we're looking at total FTE, or full-time equivalents of administrators. So you can see the green section is showing that Upper Arlington employs more administrators than Milford. So when we look at all of this, the takeaway is that Upper Arlington pays their administrators more, they serve less students, and there's more of them. This chart is showing per pupil revenue yield for each mill. So in the bottom section, Milford is just above $150, so it's somewhere between I think it's around $175. And then you can see that Upper Arlington is about $375 per pupil revenue yield for each mill. When we compare ourselves to other like districts, and we see these like districts, I've shared this before, but we're, bottom 4 in the 10 like districts, including ourselves. There's really 11 districts there. We're in the bottom 4 and below the average. When we look at comparing like districts, so if you want to go back to this chart that I just showed you between Upper Arlington and Milford, we're seeing that in 2022, the revenue yield per student was the second lowest in this grouping. The top section up here is North Royalton, and this lower section here is Oak Hills. I also know that there's some small text here. This is going to be available on the website, so you'll be able to pull this down and look at it and kind of pore over it yourself, but I just wanted to make that point as well. When we look forward here, this is local districts. So tried to find districts that were similar to us in the area that we could all kind of put a location to. I will say that's one of the difficult things when you're using the ODE-like districts. You might be seeing districts on a list that you don't even know. When we look at this local district comparison, we're the second lowest, again, Oak Hills being just slightly lower at a little over $100 per student. But still, Milford is well below the average in per pupil expenditures in this grouping. The next thing I did is I took and these are going to get slightly smaller as we go, but this is all of Hamilton and Claremont County. So Milford is the 7th lowest per pupil expenditures in this grouping. This grouping is actually Claremont, Hamilton, Warren, and Butler. And you can see that the district is well below the average within that grouping. There was also talk of the 77 cents on the dollar that is spent on classroom instruction. This is a very technical document, I would say, that I was able to pull down. It's part of the financial report that goes along with the state report card. Specifically, it's the technical document that explains how curriculum instruction is calculated. And I think the thing that's really important here is that each line item is categories depended how it was coded. Treasurers often say that you could get 10 of us in a room and we would probably code things 10 different ways. And I don't mean to poke light at that, but these are being coded by individuals that are human. And some of it actually plays into historically how it was coded in districts. I was able to identify around over $800,000 from these codes that are excluded from our classroom instruction totals that potentially could be coded in but just have not been in the past, so for what that's worth. We also had a question about AP and honors classes. Mr. Daniels is here to kind of talk through this. I don't know if you want to take this slide and talk through it, but I'm happy to also weigh in.
There was a question about what happens to students if we don't have AP courses. So what I did is I tried to break it into 3 scenarios. So if these are as an example, this isn't our pure enrollment. So if you have 27 AP language students take the course during their 12th grade year, because that's the equivalent to 12th grade English. So they are sitting in 1/7 of a teacher's day. If you were to remove AP, those 27 students could technically all move into Honors English 12. There's no savings because you're still sitting in 1/7 of a teacher's day. So you move from AP to Honors, or regular, I should say. I think the danger is for the district, and it's a personal parent-child choice, is if you cut the AP language course, that 1/7, you can potentially move some kids into Honors English 12, but then you potentially For students who are looking to really accelerate, you then push them into College Credit Plus. So one semester of a English course at the college equates to their English 12 credit. So they're already out of the equation. So maybe 12 go and 15 stay. So now you have 15 kids in honors, which still occupies 1/7 of the teacher's day. What happens then is, because of the way that College Credit Plus is set up, each year each university has an agreement with the state of Ohio, and there's what's called a floor. That's the minimum they can charge per credit hour. So typically what we see is some of our local universities are at $40, times 3 is $120. So the district would lose $120 for each of those 12 kids that would go out into CCP, and then we would be responsible for paying for the books. Generally, we see once kids go out for one, it's really hard to come back in for a second semester. They stay out for 2, so potentially you lose $240 per student plus the equivalent books for each of those courses. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. Most of our AP courses are what we call swaps, so they take the place of a math, a 4th-year math, they take place of an English, they take place of an advanced science, they take place of a social studies. Where that doesn't happen is in other areas like music theory, but also know that the district does not run courses where we do not have the enrollment to do so. And that happened this year. We had 7 students enroll for an AP course. We could not justify running that course for 7 students. We did counsel them and work with them to see what a like AP course could be, or we did try to find them a like CCP course, because we know that it's not financially sound to be running a course for 1 to 7. And each year, the treasurer can pull up a full report of our year deduction from our foundation for our CCP courses, and then we do have a budget line internally where the local colleges bill us for books, and we pay for those books. Students are required to return those. We do have the ability to sell them back. Pre-COVID, we were renting. It was saving the district a lot of money. Post-COVID, we've seen move away from rentals. That has gone the other way to just purchasing. And sometimes we're able to reuse the same book for another student. Sometimes we're able to sell it back. Sometimes we just have to recycle it. It just depends on. But the district is required by law to pay for the books and takes a deduction for each of the credit hour courses that our students take.
So I've got a question. So students pay for the AP class because they pay for the test, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so teachers are paid based on their years of service and education level, right? Whether you're master's plus or whatever. So if the students are paying for the AP test, what makes it cost effective to move them to honors or whatever, rather than just keep them in AP?
There is no cost effectiveness. It's a swap.
Right.
It's still 1/7 of the day. So one section of the teacher's day. So there is no savings. You're just moving them from AP to honors 12. It's a 0.
Right, I just didn't know, because in some of the thing it said we might have to cut AP classes, and it seems like it's the same cost.
I think, we're looking at, do we move the threshold? What do we set a threshold at? And I think, is it 7? Is it 15? That's a discussion we have to have together.
It's also if you, if you have to cut a teacher in that specific department, then there are less opportunities to offer those electives because they're teaching the other electives. I think social studies could be a great, pick. If we were to reduce by 1 social studies teacher, then that teacher, the courses that they teach, let's say they specialize in human geography, AP human geo, and AP psych. So now you've taken those opportunities away, because now where are you going to put those courses? Because the teachers are already teaching other coursework. So that's where you lose the ability sometimes to offer those AP courses?
I think capstone would be a good example of that. You cut an English teacher, you cut a math teacher, you can't offer capstone. That's not me being alarmist. It's just there's no longer wiggle room in the schedule to offer those 3 or 4 sections of seminar and research.
Right, I'm just saying, why would you can't cut a teacher because those kids still have to sit in a class.
They can
Whether-
sit in a study
right.
hall. That's what happens, is those kids will end up either sitting in a study hall or they'll go to College Credit Plus.
I have a tangent question. You mentioned that you review the courses for AP, and if you don't have enough students to run a course, you don't run it. Do you do that for other classes as well, like electives?
Yeah, we had like problem solving and advanced problem solving would be a good example. We didn't have enough, or because we had 15 kids that wanted that course, the teacher agreed to run them simultaneously. So that teacher was running 2 sections in one. We do that across all of the courses, and sometimes when you add new courses, they cannibalize old courses. So that happens. But yeah, we look at Jenny, John, myself, and the principals look at all the electives, and if we don't feel that one section of 15 across hundreds of courses is really effective based on what the needs are, then we don't run it. We do that for AP and we do that for regular.
Okay, and do you do that on a yearly basis?
We do it every time. Every time we do course counts in March.
Okay.
So that's done. The kids will schedule January, February. They'll run the schedule. They won't run the schedule. They'll run the course counts. Tyler and the counselors, Dr. Arnold and the counselors print that off. We sit with him and we go through. We did that with Principal Kaufman. We do that with Principal Getz because they have electives there. And there have been some times that it's affected both AP and or, I don't want to say regular ed, but just general electives. We also look at the course counts. So if it's 26.8 is for 11 sections, we divide that by, we move up, we go to 10. What does that look like? Does that put us at 29 or 30? So we look at those sections. And then that's usually what frees up our ability to offer other things as well. Because your section counts, because sometimes it happens. You just run, one course will run high and one will run low, and we try to average them out around 26 to 28. And so we look at those courses, and then that tells us what we have left in order to be able to, we have always said we schedule based on student need, and that changes from year to year.
So your argument is basically that if we cut all AP out, we don't save any money because we still have to put those kids somewhere.
Yeah, I would
Generally.
generally, I don't want to use the word argue. I think my goal is just to provide adequate information. I do want to say that sometimes in some of these courses, what I look at them as swaps. You're going to move from AP Lang to 12th grade English and AP Lit to 11th grade. I think you have opportunities. You cut a science teacher, as an example, I don't want to say we're doing that or anybody to run with that. You may not be able to run as many sections of algebra-based physics or physics BC or an AP environmental. You might not be able to run all those. So, and I think people also don't realize, I think outside of this room, I know we've talked about it, that when we move kids to CCP, there is a deduction for the district, but that is a choice. I really want to say that we respect as a district that choice that parents make to be in an AP course or a CCP. CCP, if they know they're going to a Ohio public school, public university, those credits have to transfer by law. Students are going out of state and they know if they get a 4 or 5 in an AP exam, that will transfer, where anatomy class from Sinclair is one of our universities that we use, may not transfer to another state. It's a personal choice. We just want the public to know that it's not a cost savings to the district to move everybody to CCP, and just cutting one section, those kids have to go somewhere.
Yeah, and back to the word argument, I meant that more as a legal term rather than a pugilistic one, so
I'm just advising consent.
there you go. Thank you.
So now I'd like to discuss the levy options and also have a discussion with the board. I want to say, before I outline these options, we work in a people business. Whether it's the people in the classroom that are educating students, the people that feed the students, the people that keep the building safe for the students, the people that clean the building for the students. It's a teamwork. It's teamwork. And as we discuss these things, it's very difficult to put a number on people. It's a challenge. It's something I don't take lightly, and I want everyone to know that. So we're talking about people's livelihoods when we talk about some reductions here, so I just want to make sure I say that as a caveat before I start moving into this. I wanted to start with a breakdown of just how we are where we are right now. So I had a question, like how in the world can we be talking about potentially eliminating positions or things or expenditures when we have around $40 million in the bank when we start the fiscal year? So I'm going to break it down, hopefully in a little bit more personal finance terms, and then I'm going to relate it hopefully back to our finances now. So if we were looking in July 2023 in our personal checkbook and we saw a balance of $3,913 and we were bringing in a paycheck over a period of time of $78.79 and we subtracted out our bills, our ending checkbook balance would be $33.83, okay? So when we look at 2 years or 2 periods of time, the ending check balance from the first is the starting checkbook balance of the second. You can think about balancing your checkbook month to month if you still do that, but I'll leave that where that is. But this is how we look at our starting balance, our ending balance, and how we get to the next year. So you can see with the same kind of spending habits, we end up getting to $27.58 at the end of this time period. If we look at 2 years ahead, the $27.58 again becomes the beginning check balance, and the ending check balance is $16.13. You'll see $16.13 comes down to the July 26, and those bills overtake the paycheck, and essentially we're paying out more than we're bringing in, and we end up being at $356. When you look at this over time, $39.13 becomes $356. This is the forecast. It's just got a lot less zeros, okay? This is the financial situation we're in right now. When we apply it to a basic forecast, you can see the starting balance, the ending balance, and how that ending balance becomes the next year's starting balance. This section of revenue, surplus or deficit, when we see red here, that's bad. That means that we're taking in, or we're spending out more than we're taking in. And it's eroding away our cash balance. The bottom section is showing what the state looks at when we submit our financial data. It shows that when we cross into this orange section, we're in warning. When we're in this pink section, it's caution, warning, emergency. So again, the orange section is caution, warning, and then emergency. So we see that we have a downward trajectory into emergency. You might say, what is making up our annual expenditures? This is making up our expenditures by forecast line. So the blue section are our salaries. The orange is our benefits. The green is our purchase services, which, as we know, it's literally services we purchase, such as busing is in there. The red section are the supplies. And then you'll notice up here we start to see this kind of light green area. That is our debt service that we have to transfer money to pay debt When we look at these needs in millage, these are updated based off of the valuations I got from the county auditor on Tuesday of the week of Thanksgiving. So when we look at our needs in terms of millage right now, in calendar year 24, the millage need is 7.25 mils. If we were to essentially seek going on the ballot without any reductions in 2025, we'd be looking at 7.92, and in 2026, it would be 10 mils. The reason for this, and I'm going to bring this slide back, I think I've shown it since October. Scenario A was, we put the levy on the ballot in November, it passes, start collecting in 2024. That's what, where you're seeing this red star here. We are in scenario B now, which is the levy failed, and that means if we were to put something on in March or in November, and that be a successful ballot item, the collection will not happen until 2025. That's why we see this ramp up in millage. There's also a ramp up in millage between 2025 and 2026 because we have a traffic light that has to be paid for out on Eagles Way. The district is paying the majority of that. There's also some work that has to be done over on Wolf Pen Pleasant Hill on the entrance to Eagles Way that we've recently gotten some information on, and that's all factored in to these numbers. So as we get into levy options, there's 3 options that I'm bringing tonight, as I said. The first one is an increase of millage to 7.25 mils, which results in 0 additional reductions. This does include, however, $2.77 million in previous efficiencies due to just reductions or tightening the belt of the district, as well as the way we issued our debt. Number 2 is keep millage at 5.99. But in order to do that, we'd have to cut the difference of expenditures from 5.99 mils to 7.25 mils, which results in about $2 million in reductions. And it's important to know that if these reductions happen, they cannot come back after a passed levy.
And that's $2 million annual?
It's $2 million in, yes, ongoing costs. So it's essentially an elimination of $2 million of expenditures. When you look at number 3, it is reduced millage to 4.5 mils. However, the way we get there is through 4.3 million in reductions. And again, these reductions do not return following the levy passage. I will say that 2 and 3, with things not returning following levy passage, is again very different from what has happened in the district in the past. I'm now going to detail each one of these a little bit further. So when we look at the 7.25 mil operating levy, this would cost $21.15 per month per $100,000 valuation of home. Keeping in mind this would be the new valuations that the county auditor has now have been accepted by the state. This does include the running tab of all the reductions that were made prior to putting the 5.99 mil emergency levy on in November, which was an absorption of 6 positions, reduction of $150,000 in vendor contracts, that COPS financing to spread out expenditures over time, and then an elimination of 2 administrative positions, 1 through RIF and then 1 through attrition. And then with this, continuing to identify additional efficiencies as the district goes forward. Option 2, again, remaining the same. You'll notice that $17.47 per month per $100,000 of valuation is the same as essentially what was put on the ballot in November. However, again, the valuation is based off of the new valuation, so that would be the, essentially the multiplier by which we would come to the value of each home per 100,000. again, looking and continuing on with those absorbed positions that I just outlined to get from what was initially an 8.51 mill levy to 5.99 prior, and then an additional $2 million of cuts on top of that to make that levy last for 3 years. And I should say the 7.25, the 5.99, and the 4.5, they are all projected to last for 3 years. When we look at option 3, this is the 4.5 mil operating levy, and this would result in the need for permanent reductions of 4.3 million. This would get the cost per $100,000 of home to $13.13. Again, getting to that 4.3 is what we're going to detail here shortly. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Spicer to discuss some potential reductions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Espy. We'll go through some of the potential reductions. We'll start with non-personnel, but I think it's really important to verbalize that everything that is on here has value and purpose, and there's a reason why we have these positions, and there's a reason why we do some of the things that we do. And it's also, I think, important to note, as Mr. Espy has gone through some of our finances, we have a funding issue, not a spending issue. But so going forward, some of our non-personnel items would be to reduce our budgets across all departments by 15%. You know, so we do this yearly with Mr. Espy. And prior treasurers, we meet in early spring, look at budgets, and we're going to ask everyone to come to the table with a 15% budget cut to their budgets in each of their departments.
And I also want to point out that essentially every percentage of budget cut is $45,000. And there are certain departments that we can't cut the budget to. We can't cut our energy costs and reduce the budget of keeping the lights on. There are certain things that we know we can't reduce. So what I did was went through to identify that 1% is $45,000.
There's a potential to increase pay-to-play by a total amount of $50,000. Mr. Espy would work with our extracurricular and activities in athletics to determine what that amount would be per person, per sport, et cetera, generating $50,000. There's the potential to eliminate all-day kindergarten. There is some significant impact to our students with this. First of all, you know, we made a commitment to go to all-day. We would like to make, let me rephrase that, we would like to make a commitment to go to all-day kindergarten for all students, but we obviously cannot financially afford to do so. We do believe that is best for students. The impact that this would bring to the district is, you know, we risk losing families for a long time. And so I would argue that the $100,000 savings there is not, you know, risk reward is not worth that, in my opinion. And then you also, you know, the risk of losing families is that they would go to potentially another district and or parochial, and they may take advantage of the voucher program, which is their choice. We have no issue with that. We're not afraid of school choice, but we certainly would like to keep our families if at all possible. Another non-personnel directly impacting students would be busing. There's option A and option B. Busing option A would be to have a 2-mile walk radius and keep the high school busing. That's an estimated $500,000. That is certainly an impact on families, and it certainly could impact the classroom because students and their attendance could be impacted. And the same would go for option B in terms of impact, but we could go to state minimum, which is a 2-mile walk radius and no high school busing. And some of our, again, potential personnel reductions could be these 4 listed on this page would be the Director of Elementary Curriculum, Director of Fine Arts, Assistant Athletic Director, and one maintenance position that we would reduce, which would actually then, that person would then actually bump out one custodian. You know, both the director positions and the assistant athletic director positions would certainly limit the support given to those departments. The assistant athletic director, again, I had talked about everything having value and purpose, was recently approved by the board to add this position. So it would certainly have impact across the district. Next slide.
Those positions include benefits as well, correct?
Yes, that's all in.
Wanted that to be
Total
clear.
cost of the
Wanted that to be
position, yes,
clear.
sir. The next items would be, we have 7 teachers on assignment. They're acting, if you will, as similar into the role of assistant principals. And we also have a technology teacher on assignment that's paid on that teacher salary as well. The amount of support that they provide the acting principal as well as staff, I don't even think that we could list everything that they do for them. I think that these positions are invaluable. And if I recall correctly, in a committee meeting, that this board was very supportive of the teachers on assignment. And if we were able to, we would make them assistant principals like many of the neighboring districts have done. But again, we're not in a financial position to do that. We also have 3 MTSS coaches that provide a lot of reading, math, and behavioral interventions with our students. They also do a lot of data analysis for our principals and teachers and work with them. We have 7.5 media aides in the district that could certainly impact the digital citizenship that they do with our students, some of the formal typing that they do in the elementaries, and a multitude of other things that our media aides do. Our reset aides, again, something that maybe the general public might not know about or see, but the work that they do is invaluable, not to just that particular student, but also to the teacher and the other students that are in classrooms. And they work with students that have behaviors, and it just allows them to reset and then get back into the classroom, get back into their communities. Again, an invaluable asset to our buildings. There is one high school secretary position that we could reduce that would then increase job duties of other staff. We have an in-school suspension opportunity for our 7 through 12 students that would increase our out-of-school suspensions. The most important thing we can do is keep kids in school. We have a high school counselor that would be an efficiency. We would not replace a retirement, but that would impact the college and career readiness program that we currently have. We would move that person that does that into the school counselor position. And so someone would have to pick up those duties of the college and career readiness piece. A mental health interventionist, we could reduce one mental health interventionist. I mean, the amount of need that we have for staff and students and their mental health needs, I think speaks for itself. Invaluable, has value and purpose. We could cut one secondary music position. Of course, that would just decrease opportunities for students. There is the potential to reduce one science teacher, one social studies, one art, one world language, and one English language arts position at the high school, which could potentially increase class sizes. And then also potentially decrease opportunities in terms of electives.
To go a little further into the expenditure, or is the issue expenditures or is it revenue? Each of these options that are brought to you have the same effect financially. They don't have the same effect program-wise, and they don't have the same effect people-wise. But from a financial standpoint, we essentially buy 1 year of being revenues over expenditures. So when you look at this number right here, this would be the only year that the district would potentially be revenue over expenditures and then continue to have expenditures take over revenues. This is with a levy passing.
And that should be, seems like it should be the year before, but it's because of collection, is that correct?
Yeah, because it all depends of, you know, when you look at fiscal year '25, that's 25-26 school year. In calendar year '25, it would be collected and then half, and then you'd have the full phase-in by 2026, which is what you see kind of in this proposed new levies line right here.
That's how we do our 5-year forecast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the, again, the difficulty of looking at a calendar year versus our fiscal year, which is July 1 through 6/30. So I think at this point, you know, we want to know, I guess, from the board, if there's any other suggestions, things that we've maybe missed here to help inform these decisions in terms of expenses.
I'm assuming that if I took my calculator out and added all this up, this would come to 4.3 million?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Every reduction we listed adds up to 4.3 million.
So,
And that's the most aggressive, which would be busing option B. You can't have B and A, so you're not going to get
right, either or.
right. So if we're talking a 4.5, everything on this list minus option A.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts, questions, ideas, et cetera. When we look at the total numbers, I know you say we don't have a spending problem, we have a funding problem, and that's true. But so does every other district in the state. That's the hand we're dealt, unfortunately. And so I look at that example of the personal checkbook, and I think that speaks volumes, even though you're looking at it, you know, in conjunction or side by side with our funding, is that a person, a household, can't sustain that, and neither can a business, no matter if the funding is flawed or not, unfortunately. And our community spoke loudly. They had months and months of education. They had lots of details, probably the most ever as far as potential impacts, and they still voted. So unfortunately, we're in a bad spot because nobody wants to cut anything, and you're forced to because we can't sustain deficit spending. So for me, I look at all those buckets and say, like, how do you make a mix with the least impact on everybody? Like, everyone's maybe going to be impacted somehow, but how do you just make that overall impact as minimal as possible? So I just have a couple thoughts, questions, ideas, throwing out, and I don't know, this little bits add up for what it's worth, whatever. Cost impact on only removing high school busing, not impacting state minimum or not on the elementary schools. What's that financial impact look like?
It was in the chart, $500,000.
But
No,
that's
that
at
no.
state minimum.
No,
for the-
a million was,
That was the two months.
You're talking about just high school,
Yeah,
keep,
just
keep,
cutting high
no.
school busing.
I got you.
Just not impacting the lower grades at all, only high school. What does that cost? The other thing is looking at the impact on extracurricular busing. A lot of private schools only bus varsity or don't bus at all. So what's the financial impact if you were to eliminate junior high, freshman, and JV athletic busing and only bus varsity? I know private schools, getting kids to their games at the junior high and freshman JV levels falls on the team mom to create carpools, which is a little bit of a hassle, but when we're looking at not having enough money, we have to look at things, and it's just an idea. I saw on the ledger that there was $25,000 for transportation just for the band. Is that reimbursed at all by boosters, or is that what the district's paying?
That's out of the 300 funds. That's not out of the funds that are general fund. They're essentially raising their funds through pay-to-play. Part of those pay-to-play fees are funding that.
Our funding, what portion, is it covering that whole 25? That just
I
seemed like
just
a
have to go
large
look at
number
it.
for
I mean-
one program.
Covered it for the last, since I've been in this position, yes, pay-to-play has covered band transportation.
Okay,
And-
Parents and the kids pay for band transportation.
okay.
And I will say this, if it wasn't, we would be seeing transfers from the general fund to cover, and we're not doing that.
Okay, I was just a question on that. The goggle up classes, is there a fee in those classes?
Isn't that also part
Yes.
of a grant that we receive?
You want to talk?
I saw in 2000, I didn't know if we still got the grant. I found in 2000,
Paul?
in 2019, but I couldn't find it currently.
So the grant covered transportation all but the last 2 trips. General fund takes care of the last 2 trips. That comes out of CNI's, I guess field trips, and also the students pay a fee, and then Rochelle writes a grant. So the only cost to general fund for Goggle Up would be the last 2 field trips. All the others to this point in the school year are paid for the grant.
Okay, I was just curious, because I looked at the cost for that turtle telemetry, which looked cool, but then, so I'm just asking. And then the other idea is, in the corporate world, when you're faced with budgeting issues, you look at volunteer retirement packages of people to retire early. I don't know if that has been considered.
Yeah, we actually met.
We have.
We met with a company a couple weeks ago. It's something that, we're definitely evaluating. It does come with a steep cost the first year, and that's something that we are looking at. We just don't have enough data right now to be able to put it on a screen as an option. I don't want to put something as an option that I haven't fully vetted.
And then, have the numbers come out from the Claremont County Auditor as far as what increase we'll see due to the reevaluation? I know that was supposed to come out like the end of November.
Yeah, we actually got an email today with the link, and I've asked some questions, so I'm trying to get some clarity on those questions. I have the amount that are the millage amount that I was given from the deputy auditor. The issue is that the amount that we see from in terms of what the valuation is not necessarily equate to what we got from the auditor today, because there's specific items that are pulled out of those totals. So that's the clarification I'm looking for.
You made a comparison to corporate world or personal paycheck. The difference here is that I know in my job, I get a raise every year, and we're working on $2013, so we haven't had a raise in 10 years. So we're trying to balance a checkbook without any raises over time.
I
And I don't
understand.
think that is realistic for households in general. I mean, the schools are funded in such a way that we have to, if we want to maintain what we have in Milford, which I have heard Mrs. Nolan, you say, I don't want to impact the schools at all, my heart drops a lot when I see everything that was listed out there, because each of those touches students in a way that we just can't come back from.
I agree.
And
but
then
the
I also
community
think
didn't
that
offer it up.
do you want to cut me off or can I finish?
No, you can finish. I'm just saying, I
Okay.
totally agree with you.
Oh, but you just cut me off again. So the one thing that I don't think is reflected very well here, it was mentioned in one point, is the $2.7 million that the district has already tightened the belt on. For example, John brushed over, Mr. Spicer brushed over our teachers on assignment. They are essentially principals that we are getting at a teacher salary. That is amazing. The difference I've seen in Pattison and what Mrs. Kirby has been able to offer my student, who's N of 1, has really made a big impact. And so I think when you see those numbers up there, cutting teachers on assignment isn't just saving us, we are getting that much farther behind Forest Hills, who has, assistant principals at all of their buildings. So the district has already done, and I think all of John Mr. Espy's images of where we are based on average comparable districts, it shows that we are being really smart with our money. That's why it's been 10 years. And so when we go back, I know that it did not pass this time, but I honestly think that there's a lot of people just aren't aware of school. Everybody in this room is very tuned in to how schools are funded, and this is 100 votes maybe, right? So 100 votes isn't taking it either way. We need to do a better job of reaching out and talking to our community about the importance of schools and of everything that we offer for our students, because I get severe heartburn with any of those.
I have some initial thoughts as well. First of all, I get a little irritated when I hear this being compared to buying a car or buying a house. We are in the business of service. We are not a company. Every time we cut something, we are affecting over 6,000 families, as well as everybody who is employed by our district. That is very different than making a purchase that affects your own personal family. We heard loud and clear from our public that we need to make reductions, that it is not sustainable to operate the way that we do, even though we are operating lean. Because of that, I'm wondering, I know we have talked a lot about putting something on the ballot in March. And I do agree that it is very urgent that we have this money for our district. And I know that the millage goes up the longer that we wait to ask the community. However, I believe that working with all the stakeholders in the community is vital to getting this levy passed. When I talk about stakeholders, I mean everyone in the community, which includes all the people who work in our buildings, the families in our communities, the staff, the community members, as well as business owners in Milford. I'm wondering if it makes sense to have a discussion with all of them about what is important to them. We know what's important to us, but I think we need to hear what's important to the public as well. We can ask for their input about things like these proposed cuts. We can talk about reductions, but also we need to talk about general areas where we believe that we need to keep. And we spent a lot of time working on Portrait of an Eagle and what that means to us and what it means to our schools. And when we look at these cuts, we need to make sure that we are still maintaining our school and what we all came to the school for. I live in this community every day. My children go to the school. So these are not just numbers to just take away so that we can meet our budget. I think we need to hear from more than just the board when we're talking about this.
I wrote down a quote today as I was listening to a podcast. Alan Alda, John, I know I'm always telling you a podcast, new one I listened to today, but it was talking about democracy, but I thought that this was especially poignant here, that the goal is to live in a democracy that strives to serve the most people in the best possible way. And I was like, that's what our schools do. We serve the most people in the best possible way. And I think we are better as a community. That's what we're here for. That's why people moved into the district. And so I just forgot to mention that earlier, but serve the most people in the best possible way.
I think too, if we take some time to talk about these things, we can have a better discussion about smaller things that we can cut. Like, I know we had talked about some of the things that you brought up. They aren't as large cuts as what we see up here, but maybe we can start to talk about other things like that if we have more time to do that. I mean, obviously we need to make cuts. We heard that loud and clear. But I just think it would be nice to get some community input.
And I think where we need to engage our community is not saying come up to the board office, we're going to have a presentation. I think we need to get out, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier before the meeting. We maybe need to get out to, civic groups. We need to get out to churches. We need to get out to firehouses, any place where we've got people, and engage them directly rather than say, hey, we're doing Finance 101, and I totally support that, and I think that's a very good thing, but we had 4 people in the audience and maybe a couple of dozen watching online, so we're not getting much bang for our buck there. We've got to figure out how to reach more people quicker. And one of the things that you said was related to other school districts are doing better at managing their money than we are. They're not in fiscal caution, or they're not in deficit spending. And part of that, you did. And the real truth of the matter is that those folks play by a different set of rules. If you're a very urban district or if you're a very rural district, they have different rules that they play by, and the money that comes to them is different than what we get here in Milford.
I'm also very concerned because some of these cuts that we're looking at, for instance, Director of Elementary, I don't know, I'm not sure because I don't know every school, but I don't know of any other school district of our size that would have all of the curriculum go to one person. I think there's a real danger of putting too much work on our staff and causing them to burn out. And I think that's a very real concern. And a lot of people move here for the excellent school district, and we cannot do that without a staff.
So to Emily's point and suggestion of getting community input, I think it would also be good to get, perhaps a teacher group together, and because teachers are in there every day and are the bulk of the employees, and have a teacher cohort kind of assess, where can we find a few dollars per grade level, per school, per classroom, or something. I just think every idea needs to be on the table. Every dollar needs to be looked at, even if it's a small amount. Small amounts add up, and I just think every single thing needs to be on the table.
And this is a real-time list. If anybody, and I know we have several educators out here as well as administrators in the audience. If there's somebody out there that's got an idea, get it to Mr. Espy, get it to one of the board members, and we will, we'll do what we can to vet it and see if we can implement it. I mean, we don't have the, all the intelligence here. We certainly have much less than sitting on the other side of this table. So we're open to help.
Dave, can you hear me?
I can. I don't know if anybody else can. You got him?
All right, thank you. I have a few questions, and just want to join the discussion. The first, and I just made a few notes, John Espy, as you were going through the presentation. I didn't have a chance to see it with my little screen here. But I want to step back really quickly to the Upper Arlington percentage of dollars, on classroom instruction comment that you had made. And you had mentioned that you had found $800,000 miscoded. So you are saying that
It's not miscoded.
essentially there's an error in that report, that state report. Is that what you're suggesting?
It's not miscoded. It's $800,000 that were coded to the excluded codes that another district treasurer may code to curriculum or classroom instruction. I feel confident in the way that we coded because it's consistent with how the past two treasurers have coded things. So it's not.
I'm not suggesting you made a mistake in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is the state report is incorrect if, in fact, these schools are not truly treating expenditures and coding them the same way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think the takeaway is if you had the same treasurer for every school district coding things the same way, I think that it's an apples to apples comparison. There's a district actually that is at 80 cents on the dollar in the 23 report. It comes down to how it's coded. Really, is what the end game is.
You preface the comment with the administration pay in Upper Arlington and all the other tangibles that go into that percentage. But at the end of the day, that percentage is telltale because it doesn't matter what people are being paid, how many people are there. The percentage of every dollar that goes towards the classroom, full stop, is telltale, regardless of how they do it, if it's apples to apples. But when you tell me it's not apples to apples, that report is no longer accurate to me or anyone else in this state. I think it's a garbage report if what you say is true, that all these treasurers coded separately, because I thought it was a phenomenal way to measure how many true dollars are going to what we're here for, which is educating children. That's why we're here. That's why we all exist. And the percentage of that dollar is telltale, regardless of how they accomplished that. But you just blew that entire report apart that the state generates because it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. And I just simply want to confirm that that's what you're saying. Yeah?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. If that is true and you did find this 800K, do you know what that 800K, how that now positions us in a percentage of the dollar?
I don't. I found that this afternoon.
Okay.
It was one of the last things that I wanted. It was something that I honestly didn't know I was going to have ready for this meeting, but
Okay.
it was.
I think it would be helpful to learn what that is because I don't want to compare apples to oranges in this situation, but the entire community, I think, should be privy to how we compare to others the best that we can on that percentage of dollars spent in the classroom. I think it's telltale, and it does nothing with about how you're doing it. Those are the devil's in the details, but I'd love to know that. I just wanted to confirm that that's what you were saying, because if I was sitting a couple chairs away from you, it would have been easier. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that the telltale number is the expenditures per pupil. because it's the total expenditures. If it's an expenditure, it's coded as an expenditure, and it's divided by the number of kids. So going back to the telltale number is the expenditures per pupil.
And did a little workup on that while I was sitting here. They're pretty close to Indian Hill, I think, in expenditure per pupil. I think Indian Hill somewhere around 18,000 something.
They're up there, believe it or not, Lockland, I think, is the highest in the area at 21,000.
But doesn't expenditure per pupil get skewed when you have a higher burden of the cost placed against the taxpayer? Meaning you have to go out to the taxpayer for levy dollars versus a school district that is not considered wealthy like Milford and some of the others, yeah?
Well, it's really the total expenditure divided by the number of kids that are making up that expenditure. So an expenditure is an expenditure, but a revenue, which would be generated by the tax dollars, would be coming in to offset that expenditure. I think the other piece of it too is, when I started digging into that revenue yield per pupil, that's where you start to see the big differences with districts where per pupil you're bringing in $350 a kid per meal versus here you're bringing in $175. And so when you have that multiplied out by the number of students that, and I do believe Upper Arlington's similar to our size in terms of average daily membership. So like that's where you see the big difference for districts to be able to spend $17,000 or $21,000. Now, when you look at a Lockland, they have a small number of kids to spread out a lot of fixed costs, and that's why you see the higher expenditures per pupil.
Yeah. We had made the comment, I think John Spicer made the comment that we have a revenue problem, not a spending problem. I think we have, from time to time, both. And that's not this extreme indictment. It just means that when our revenues are essentially flat and our spending continues to rise, eventually those two lines will cross, which is what has happened in our district. And regardless if you want to call this a service business, a business of educating children, the softest thing we can call is that we provide love to all of our students, but all of those things come at a cost. And when our revenue remains flat, we've got to make really difficult decisions. And the decisions, I made it really clear in our last board meeting, the last thing I want to do is impact our teachers, and the last thing I want to do is cut busing. Those are two things that I hold pretty sacred. I appreciate the administration putting together what I counted was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, about 15 different bullet points of ways we can cut costs to get to that 4.3. Those, like Ms. Chestnut, made my stomach hurt when I heard those. And what I assure you, everyone that's watching that's a teacher in this district and everyone in the seats right now that's a teacher in this district are looking at those cuts, and they're probably wondering, where are the administrative cost cuts? It's inside of Mr. Spicer's office and all the way down in the very building we're sitting in right now. That doesn't mean there's $4.3 million in that office or $2 million. I don't know what's there, but I believe that part of the reflection of what we need to do needs to happen in that office, and I can't call that. I don't know what that is, but I think it should be strongly encouraged and a part of this list.
It is a part of the list. It is a part of the
It is
list.
part of the
There are
list?
2 on there.
Okay, there are some on there?
There are 2 on that list. I reviewed
There's two on
them.
the list, okay, fantastic.
Jerry,
I didn't see the
Jerry, if you had
presentation,
been
John, so
here in
what-
the meeting, it might have been a little easier.
What's that?
If you were able to attend meetings in person because you didn't live in Florida, it would be easier for you to see these numbers.
Thank you. I can't attend every meeting for my own personal reasons, and thank you for your comment. It doesn't mean a lot to me, but thank you. I'm participating, and if it's hindering any of their participation right now, just please let me know. If you don't like what I have to say, that's okay. We don't always agree. Mr. Espy, can you please pull up the slide that I sent you on email to let everyone see what I've put together?
Yeah, please just give me a second.
Thank you.
Also, it's not that we don't like what you have to say, Jerry. We have a very diverse board, and we always get along with, we don't always get along, but we do listen to many diverse opinions, and I believe we respect each other, especially in these committee meetings. But it is very difficult. It is a lot easier when you are here in person. It's more engaging, and it's a lot easier to work. So I can't speak for Ms. Chestnut, but I do believe that's what she's saying.
And for the record, I've missed one board meeting out of 23, and 2 special meetings out of, I don't know, 4 or 5. The committee meetings are what they are, and until it's a board requirement to be present at those, I'll continue to live my life how I choose, and I appreciate the commentary. Does everyone see what's on the screen now? Can you see it, Dave Miranda?
Yes, it's on there.
Yeah, it's on the
Total
screen.
expenditures.
Okay, fantastic. I received some data from Mr. Espy for 8 years' worth of total expenditures and FTEs in the administrative office. What you're seeing right now is a graph that represents those expenditures. What I don't have plotted on this graph is FTEs. In 2015, the administrative staff at Milford had 25 full-time equivalents. They now have 31. This is over 8 years, again, from 2015 to 2023. What I want you to take away from this graph is that we have experienced in our district a 29.6% increase in administrative costs from 2015 to 2023. This is not my data, by the way. This came straight from our treasurer a few days ago, and I wanted to share this as a opportunity, not all of it, but there's an opportunity inside of this very specific area of our district that we should consider. And it sounds like, and I'm sorry, John Spicer, that I missed the two roles that you've proposed to be cut. I do apologize for that. It would have been helpful if I was there and had and saw it in person. You're exactly right, Ms. Chestnut. If I had the presentation ahead of time, it would have been a lot clearer. But this is not to be denied. This came straight from Mr. Espy's information that he shared with me. Our administrative costs total were $3,857,366 in 2015. They are now $5,486,181 for an increase over 8 years of $1,628,815 and some change. Again, that represents a 29.6% increase. I want to point this out for the public simply as an example of an area, not in its entirety, but of an area that we should consider. I don't have the answers of where that is inside of that area, but we'd be remiss to ignore it. And John, sounds like you've already started to chip away at that in your 4.3.
And I'm looking at the same chart, but I'm dividing it in the middle. So I'm looking at the last 5 years, and the first year of those 5 is sitting at, I can't read that number on there, what is that, 500,000?
5 million.
5 million? Okay, 5 million. And it looks like right now it's at 5.5. So we've gone up, or maybe not even 5.5, maybe 5.4. And if you do the
It's
math.
almost 5.5. It's 5.486, so.
Okay, well, we'll round up.
About 500 numbers.
I want to say this is through 2023, and this is prior to us reducing 2 FTE as well. So we're starting to see savings from those 2 FTE in fiscal year 24.
And again, John, this is your data, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad that you added that color at the end, because I think it's important for everyone to know. And I'll also comment that Ms. Mason's take on the levy, I believe, is spot on. I couldn't agree more that engaging the stakeholders, and the stakeholders include parents, teachers, I think even some of the kids could have a say-so in this, the administration, everyone that touches this district. We need to do a better job of engaging this group to find out, not just educate, but to find out what's really, really important to the group. Because I want us all holding hands, running hard after this, and without some sort of extreme give and take and engagement, focus groups, etc. And we don't have time to do that, to cram something in March. It's going to pass. The history of this district says that it's the second one is in jeopardy as well, and I'd love to break that streak if possible.
Okay, back to my original point. Going from 5 million to 5.5 million, starting with baseline year of, I think it's 2019, and going through 2023, so 4 years of increases, that comes to an even 10%.
Yep.
If you amortize that out over 4 years, it's 2.5% increase per year, and that doesn't sound horribly unreasonable. I mean, I like your chart. I like you looking back at the past, but this predates anybody that's on this board. So I look at the last 4 years, and it looks pretty flat, maybe 5.3 to 5.5. So I'm not sure we're doing a horrible job.
Well,
We can always do better, certainly.
Dave, let me talk about the FTEs. So there was a reference of 25 to 31. Mr. Espy clarified it's actually 25 to 29. 3 of those are an assistant athletic director that this board voted 5-0 to hire. There's a mental health coordinator that we have since brought on, and also an assistant treasurer. So there's 3, and I'd have to work with Mr. Espy to figure out what that 4th one is. I think I have an idea, but I'm not going to say because I'm not 100% sure. But so the reality is we've added an assistant athletic director, a mental health coordinator, and an assistant treasurer, and 1 more position since 2015. And as you said, 2.5% over however many years.
2.5% a year
Right.
for the last 4 years.
Thank you.
Which is a lot lower than inflation.
Which is a lot lower than inflation. That 10% is probably covered in inflation in the last year.
I would also say that these 2 guys engaged this community. These 2 people were in homes. These 2 people were talking to folks, and we need 5 board members to do the same. That's what we need.
I'm on board for it.
Thank you.
I'm committed to it. Dave will be in retirement by then.
I will be in retirement. I'm not dying, though.
That
And
sounds
if you
like
think
a
you're
yes.
not going to see me, those of you that are out there and know me, you're wrong. Okay, any other comments?
I did look up another definition today that I wanted to read to folks here about good faith. In human interactions, good faith is a sincere intention to be fair, open, and honest, regardless of the outcome of the interaction. And I think that that's really important when we talk about topics from which we have diverse perspectives, that we all come and that I can trust the people that are in conversation with me, that they are collaborating in good faith to get what is best for the community. And so I will always show up with good faith. I will always put the staff and the students at the heart of my decisions. And that means knocking on a lot of doors and saying, hey, taxpayers, we're worth it. That's what I'm up for.
Okay, well, I guess we're to the point to actually make some motions here. So let's move on to item number 2 on board business, and item 2, 3, and 4, just so we are clear on this, Mr. Espy, these resolutions of necessity are going to be on the March ballot,
This
correct?
would be to place any of these, and these are continuing levies that the district has traditionally done. In the past, they require greater than 2/3, so four members of the board must vote to place them on, and it would place these items on the March ballot.
And then even after tonight, should one of them pass, we still have a couple other resolutions because what we're working against is a December 20th deadline.
That's correct. So that's the deadline to place items on the March ballot. So this would be a first resolution. There would have to be a second resolution, which is a resolution to proceed. That can only happen after the county auditor certifies
To about 2
these.
weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's, they're working hard over
They're
there right
working
now,
hard,
yes.
So, after all this discussion this evening, and talk about getting groups of community and teachers and so forth together, since we don't have a breakdown of what configuration of things, what may possibly be cut or reduced or efficiencies made because we haven't engaged these groups yet, I don't know that we're in a position to vote on a millage when we don't know what the other groups are going to have as far as input. You know, because if we vote on any one of these things, based on what we've seen up here, that might not be what's important to a teacher group or the community group. We're 5 out of the whole community, and like Dave said, there are people, the staff, the teachers, who have more input than the 5 of us up here, or the 4 of us. So I don't know that we're ready to vote. Well, we can all agree we for sure need a levy. If I'm putting my vote on one of these items, I don't know exactly what's making up those items because we haven't decided on anything.
Well, we don't need to decide yet. The options are a 7.25, which is roughly equivalent to 599 in the new timeline, a 599, which is some cuts, or a whatever the lower number is, which is a bunch of cuts. We don't need to define the cuts at this moment. We frankly don't need to define them by March. Like, we still have time to do that. I think what we need to vote on, or not vote on tonight, is go back with the intention of no cuts, the intention of some cuts, the intentions of more cuts.
And if I look at this list, no cuts is easy. We know what that one is. 4.5 is all of these things. And the one in the middle, the 5.99, is a laundry list where you have to take out approximately 1.99, I believe it was, 1.98
Half of them.
million, 2 million. So, and those things can float around. I agree with you, Emily. We're looking at a a fiscal plan here, and not what the actual cuts are. The cuts need to come from these folks over here.
No, those cuts need to come from the U5. You're going to make that decision. We gave you the options. You're going to decide.
Well, it won't be you, Dave, because we're not doing it tonight anyway. Don't look so worried.
I'm just measuring my words.
Because I will tell you that you need to put a 7.25 mil levy on the ballot. You need to make a decision on what kind of district you want to have. What do you want to offer? That's what you're deciding. You should put a 7.25 mil levy on the ballot, whether it's March or November. And if it doesn't pass, you come back again. Let the state come in. They'll tell you what to cut. If that's what this community wants, let the state come in and tell this community what kind of school district they can have. We have a funding problem, not a spending problem. If you cut every single principal, assistant principal, every administrator in my office, and you cut his position and his assistant treasurer, you're still in deficit spending. That 5.4 million doesn't cover the 5.6 million you're in deficit spending now. That's the decision you need to make.
Fair enough. Sounds like it's time to vote. I feel like I'm Jeff Probst here, sorry. So I need a motion on the 7.25 mil resolution of necessity.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? Mr. Espy, call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan,
No.
Mrs. Mason,
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you. Now move on to the 5.99 mil resolution of necessity. Any discussion? I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? I'm just going to say the community pretty much gave us some direction that we need to be thoughtful about what we're doing. I think this is a thoughtful way, and I think we can do things that don't affect the education of these kids and come to this number. That's where I sit on this one, so I guess we need to, unless somebody else has another comment, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan,
No.
Mrs. Mason,
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion fails.
Okay, we now come to the third one. It's a 4.5 mil resolution of necessity. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I believe $4.3 million in permanent reductions is going to change the way that our school looks and functions, and I will not be supporting it.
Yeah, I think anything like this, if we have to build it back, and these are permanent cuts, so we would have to get new money in order to bring any of this back. I think this sets our district back probably 20 years, maybe. And that's what I have to say on that. So any other comments?
I'm just going to say the community spoke at the previous amount, and we need some income. So the community spoke at 599, and so that's my thought on that.
Okay, so let's call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan,
Yes.
Mrs. Mason,
No.
Mrs. Chestnut,
No.
Mr. Miranda.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay.
I would like to say something. It sounds like we're not going to be putting something on the March ballot. It is imperative that this board make a decision by March about the November ballot. There are reductions of potential people, and I think it's fair to those people that they know their position's fate in March.
Understood, it's a good point.
And it's pretty much a morale killer to come to work every day and say, I wonder what they're gonna vote on now. That's up to us as a board, including Mr. Combs, if he should choose to come, to vote, to say we support our staff. We support the staff at a level that delivers the Milford education that my family has been lucky enough to get for 15 years, and why people choose to come to Milford.
Okay, any other comments?
Hopefully I show up at the next board meeting.
Okay, so the next order of business is we're going to move into executive session as a board.
Mr. Miranda, can I
Yes.
make a suggestion that
Yes,
we
sir.
amend the agenda to allow public participation?
Prior to?
Since there will likely be no action
Yes.
after executive session.
So I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda. I need a second.
Second.
Call the roll.
Sorry, the first was Mr. Miranda, the second was
Me.
Ms. Chestnut. This is to amend the agenda to move public participation ahead of executive session. Roll call will be Ms. Nolan,
Yes.
Mrs. Mason,
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes. So now do we need a second motion, or do we just combine those two together?
You just combined it.
Okay, so let's move into the next portion of our agenda, which is, as amended, is now public participation. Do we have anyone?
Ms. Amanda Fox.
Amanda Fox. So I just have some notes that I took tonight, and I just want to kind of go over them. I heard a lot of the board members talking, and I just want to make some points. We've been talking about a levy actively, like we need one right now, for over a year. I heard a board member tonight talk about that they want to engage with the teachers and the community. I would like to say that you had 2 years to do that. Instead of sending emails attacking English teachers, maybe you could have engaged and had an open discussion with them about their jobs and what's needed out of that. To the 2 board members that don't have children in this district and/or this state, I'd like to know what your children get at their school that we offer at Milford. Let me rephrase that. What do your kids get at, or what are your kids not getting at their school that we're getting here at Milford? And the athletics budget is not the general fund budget, so that doesn't count. I'd also like to say on the chart that showed the increases for the admins, I'd like to know what the teachers' increase looks like, because I hear repeatedly a current board member talk about the admins. So I'd like to know what that trajectory looks like for teachers as well, because I think that it's probably very similar. It's called their raises. And I would also like to note that this current board did vote for the admin's increase in salary just within the last calendar year. So that increase from 2022 to 2023 on that chart was actually done by the 5 of you. I'd also like to talk about the work balance of our staff members. I heard that Emily Mason talked about that, so I'd like to talk about that. At the last board meeting, one of our current board members demanded that our treasurer give him a year's worth of numbers by the morning. That was at 9:15 p.m. I would like it to be noted to the community that that man has 2 children and a wife at home, He spends countless hours answering his emails, which, by the way, are all public records, so you can see how many emails certain board members demand of our treasurer. And I would just like it to know that they have a family, and there is such a thing as a work-life balance, and he deserves that too. I would like to know, since it was voted to have no levy, we've been told that there needs to be cuts, so what are the cuts going to be? I think that you've had a year to decide, and certain board members keep pushing that off. I think I got all my points in.
We have another, Mr. Paul Chambers.
Mr. Chambers, 3 minutes.
So I just had a recommendation, and also speaking to the public through our online feed and in this room. Don't fall for the consistent people that come in this room that I do applaud for showing up every month for our board meetings and being a part of the conversation, but don't fall for the fear-mongering, the dramatic, I don't know, expressions that those people do each and every month to try to grab at the heartstrings. Our community spoke, and what I've not heard in the many board meetings and the many conversations I had recently through our last election is that we do not talk enough to our elderly. We don't talk enough to our disabled. Among other groups that are taxpayers, we don't speak with the people that don't have. Why is it always such an attack for not having children in the district? My son just graduated this year. Does that exclude me from being an added member, someone that can give back to this community? No. So that argument's just, it's dead and old. Stop. The mudslinging that happened in our community and also happens on this board, direct and indirect, is laughable. And we are being laughed at right now because we got 5 board members that can't act professional and speak professional to each other, at least on the face. What you guys do when you go back in executive session, we'll never know. But it's disgusting. And the community sees it, and that's why they vote the way they vote. Both ways. So we got to do better as a community. Lastly, 46 seconds, got you, Davey. I had spoken to someone who is a multi-million business owner in this community that has said he has approached this board and administration with ideas on forming a form of alumni group that could bring income in from former students, former employees of our district, that a lot of other districts do have. There are other forms of raising money than going to a taxed community and asking for them to foot the bill. So yes, we do need a levy, but we got to find other ways to find money without taxing.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers, right on time.
We have an additional Jocelyn Watson.
I just want to start off first and say thank you to Mr. Spicer and Mr. Espy for your tireless work. I did see you guys out there on off hours trying to get this message out, and I really appreciate that. I just want to say that I do think a united board is essential to the success of a future levy passage in 2024. If board members voice that they do not want schools impacted, then they need to be on board with a plan that gets us there, and they need to vocally support that levy passage. A no vote on a levy option that does not preserve the status quo sends a clear message to the constituents that voted for you on where you believe the need is, and they will vote accordingly to support a levy if you agree that one is needed. If we don't pass a levy in 2024, now in November, because March appears to be off the table, the costs will only go up more, the levy need will raise, or cuts will get deeper. And no additional revenue will be added in 2025, which is just going to put us further behind. As someone who was in this community for this levy tirelessly for months, I would love to see more messaging to all members of the community. But at some point, the community also needs to seek out these answers that we are trying to make readily available. If you believe that we need a levy, then we need you to come help us get that message out. There's only so much that a committee of 20 volunteers can do. I believe whether or not people do seek out that information and support the need is highly dependent on the cue that they get from the person on the board that they voted for. If they see the person they voted for voting no on a levy option, they view that as a reason to vote no on this levy, and they will not seek out that information to get their questions answered. Ms. Nolan, you've stated that you don't want to see any cuts made, and I think that that is the right answer for our district. Nobody wants to see any of those things cut. It is heartbreaking. We have an opportunity to put something on the ballot, I guess now for November, that preserves that. But if that isn't supported by all 5 members of this board, then we will not get there. Thank you.
That's it.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Our next regular board meeting is December the 14th in this room here at 6 p.m. And we are going to adjourn to executive session. I need a motion to enter into executive session for the following purposes. And let me state them here.
Wait, am I able to participate, like, give comments after the public participation, or would that be after we come back?
No, we're not coming back.
I know.
Go ahead.
Okay. I would like to address something that Mrs. Fox said, as well as Mr. Chambers in their comments. Mr. Chambers said that we do not act professionally as a board. And I can see how that is seen by the public. Mrs. Fox said that Mr. Espy does not have a good work-life balance. And I would like to address that because when we hired Mr. Espy, he was head and shoulders above any other treasurer candidate that we interviewed. He was by far the best candidate, and we all agreed on it. We all talked about it ad nauseum. He came more prepared than anyone to the interview. He already had ideas for how he could save money for our district. He has put several of those things into place. He comes prepared to every meeting with multiple options for us to look at. He's always open to discussion from board members, but also the public. When the public has a question, he offers to send them information. I have witnessed some very disturbing behavior through email, as well as in meetings and on social media from some of our board members. It is not professional. Behavior is often rude, demanding, and accusatory. Sometimes it is even an outright lie and puts dangerous misinformation into the public and undermines the credibility of our treasurer. I have also witnessed what in law is considered discovery abuse. This is making overbroad requests and burying him in paperwork requests. He is not our personal assistant. He is able to provide us information and should provide us information if we ask for it. However,
I believe that when we ask for information, we should not just be asking for a document dump. I would rather have him spend time looking for solutions on how to run our school efficiently in a fiscally responsible way than to go on a frenzied hunt for every documentation requested. I think it would behoove us as a board to find what we can on our own, much of which is publicly available through the state treasurer's website. And think about asking efficient questions instead of just asking for a document dump. It's not his job to convert information into different formats for us. There are not enough hours in the day to fill every bit of information that has been requested. We need to let him do his job so that we can do ours, so that we can run the school district efficiently.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, let's go back then. I need a motion to enter into executive session for the following purposes. The first one is G5, matters required to be kept confidential by federal law, federal rules, and state statutes by division G5 of the section 121.22 of the revised code. That's the first one. And the second one is G1, to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Well, there won't be any discussion for this, so call the roll, please.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes. We will be going into executive session, and we will not be voting. We will also not be coming back out here to adjourn. We will adjourn from in there. So we thank you for your attendance tonight, and have a nice evening.